All right, so I first wanted to talk about kind of the release cycle that Drupal has. So it's been almost a year since Drupal 10 was released in December 2022. We've got through Drupal 1 or 10.1 already. That came up in June. And right now we're waiting for Drupal 10.2, which is just coming at the end of this year. And it's already like well on its way. There are some great changes in Drupal 10.2. And if we wanted to, we could take a look at them. You can like download Drupal 10.2 and set it up. And then there's a plan for Drupal 10.3 to be released again in June. So it's looking like it's a semi-yearly release cycle. But I also want to talk about the ends of life. So Drupal 8 has been EOL for a while, and that means, of course, there's no security updates, there's no updates to speak of, and you're not going to be very secure if you're running those sites. So it's highly, highly recommended to not be using end-of-life software. Drupal 9 its end of life is tomorrow. So we are, I'm sure we're all feeling the crunch getting our sites off of Drupal 9. And then, surprise already, Drupal 10.0 will have its own end of life this December. So that's really short. So what is appearing is that you get about a year per point release. So when you're on Drupal 10.0, you should have already updated to 10.1, and you should be getting ready to update to 10.2. And Drupal 7, the amazing stalwart that it is going to be around until January 2025. So if you're working on sites with Drupal 7, then get on with it, but you're not as crunched for time as we are with Drupal 9. All right, can we get the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So this talks about Islandora and Drupal 10. We've been using Drupal 10 in the starter site since July 2023. There are some pretty big changes if you are wanting to move your site to Drupal 10. The first one big one is that Islandora defaults will not work for you anymore. And there are some extensive instructions for how to remove defaults in its README. Please read them and be very careful with it, because if you accidentally uninstall Islandora defaults too soon, you are very likely to destroy the site that you're working on. And another reminder that if you're doing that kind of work, it's probably best to do it on a clone of your production site and not on the production site itself. And so where Islandora is at with 10.2 is that we are just working on getting all of our tests passing. There is one of the cool things that comes with Drupal 10.2 is a new form UI. And if you would mind clicking that link, we can just show what the new form UI looks like. Here's a screenshot in this ticket. When you want to say, I want to add a new media field, add a new number field, it now shows them with like a little description of what each field type does. However, we've got a test in the Islandora module that assumes the old form style, and so it doesn't work with this new form. We need to refactor that just a little bit. All right, thank you. Could we go back to the slides? Sweet. And our plan is that as soon as 10.2 is released, we'll be ready to shift the starter site onto 10.2. So if you are using the starter site to spin up your site, it'll be already on it. And I didn't mention this earlier. Actually, could we go to the next slide, please? I think I mentioned this. Okay, so semantic versioning is really important in Drupal and in Islandora. And it's like the meaning behind all these 10.1, 10.2 numbers. Essentially, the first number is the major version. And when those change, you need to be really careful. Like there's going to be some major upgrades and tweaks needed to keep your site working. For the second number, the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, those are called the minor releases, and they are not a big deal. You can usually, almost always, just update kind of in place and things should still work. Do be careful nonetheless. These are still ways that could potentially break your custom integrations if you've got things that hook in to the underbelly of Drupal. And point upgrades are it would be like 10.0.1, 10.1.2. That very last digit is the kind of bug fix or point release, and they're usually incredibly small, but can often contain security updates, so they're very important to still use. When you're upgrading, always run the update.php script. You can use that with Drush by doing updb, the command, or update database. I'm not sure what the long form is. But that's really important to do, and also clear your cache to flush out all the PHP classes and stuff that it's done. So when you're maintaining your site, please do especially tend to get your security updates done quickly, because Drupal is a huge open source software, and lots of people have figured out that it's profitable to find ways to hack it. And as somebody who has had a site which was vulnerable to an incident like that, I can definitely say that it's important to keep those security updates up to date. Okay, slide. Do I have another slide, please? Thank you. All right, Carrie, here's the meat of upgrading to Drupal 10. I wanted to kind of give a bullet point list of what things are that you're going to need to think about. I cannot guarantee that this is complete. If you have more stuff, please, let us know. There's a thread on the Google mailing list about your updates to Drupal 10, and if you want to mention anything for the community to be aware of, please do it there. So the first thing is that Drupal 10 requires PHP 8.1, and so that's a newer version. Some people are still potentially on 7.4 or 8.0, although 7.4 is end of life, so please make sure, I hope that you're updating. The second step is to carefully remove the deprecated software. So that's Islandora defaults. Again, important to read the instructions, and the Islandora install profile. And Alan Stanley posted a really long, really thorough list of commands that you can run in that thread on the mailing list if you want to remove the Islandora install profile because it's not compatible with Drupal 10. The next part is mostly within your composer.json file. So this is doing composer requirements. You need to add a couple requirements to your root composer.json, especially if your minimum stability is set to be stable. So config update only has an alpha version ready for Drupal 10, and the Drupal context module has a release candidate available for Drupal 10. And I checked this just a couple days ago. Maybe they're going to eventually release, I'm not sure. But these are dependencies of some of the Islandora modules. And if you don't have this alpha and RC specification in your root composer JSON, which is the one at the main, your Drupal folder, your big Drupal directory, if they're not in that root composer JSON, then Composer will probably not let you install this, and you will have some problems. And then the main thing to change your Drupal version is bumping the Drupal core composer scaffold project and the core recommended from what's probably caret 9.5, change it to caret 10.1, and then change drush to either 12 or 11. 11 is still good for a little while, but not very long. If you go to 12, you're going to lose something called Drush Launcher, and Drush Launcher helps make it really simple for you to just type drush and then a command. The drush script actually lives somewhere in your vendor bin drush, or in your vendor bin folder. And so if you don't have Drush Launcher, then you need to type in vendor bin drush and then your command, and it's really obnoxious. So what I've done in the past is I've made aliases so that drush points to that specific thing in my vendor bin folder. There are other ways of doing this, and I think that they're working on something, we're working or are completed something in BuildKit, but I haven't gone completely to figure out what is going on with that. So that is, in a nutshell, how to do the Drupal upgrade. So once you've done all these changes in your composer.json file, you need to run a command such as composer install or composer update, and that will deploy these changes to your composer.json spec into the actual code that you have. And I left the link to the composer instructions from Drupal.org, because those are very thorough and explain a lot of how to do this kind of stuff. All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Rosie, just for the recording mostly, I've been asked a couple times, how do I get to PHP 8.1? And the answer in ISLE is pretty super easy. You just need to move up to a Islandora/Drupal container version greater than 2.0.0. So I think
Excellent.
we're up to 2.0.10 right now, and I recommend you take the latest.
All right, thank you. Yes, and if you're not using ISLE, then it's get your sysadmin to do it, install PHP, and then tell Nginx or Apache which one to use. I always get like bogged down in that and can't figure out how to do it, but I know that it is possible, and I think I've done it before.
And then it's also very probable that once you do all of these things, Composer will still be yelling at you about incompatible versions. And that's just a matter of time and energy. You have to go through and like reconcile all those Composer incompatibilities. And most of the time, what works for me is to just go and look at the Git repo that backs up the project, or sometimes you can get it from something like Packages, where you're able to see what are the versions. But with a lot of these, there's like, you know, a 2.x branch and a 3.x branch, and the 3.x branch has a whole pile of commits that are like upgrades for D10. So you know you need to move up to the 3.x version module.
That's true. One step that I didn't mention was upgrading all of your modules in your Drupal site to make sure that they're Drupal 10 ready or compatible. And there is a module called Upgrade Status, which can help you a lot with that. I found it very, very helpful.
I'm kind of inclined to agree with Noah that by far the most time-consuming part of this has been updating all the projects, and that, you know, you may update one module to be compatible with Drupal 10, but it might have dependencies in something else, and sometimes you can get into a bit of a challenging situation where you have to like update interconnecting dependencies and modules. So I mean, this is where you're probably going to spend most of your time with trying to update your site to Drupal 10, is just trying to get the actual project to update. It's all you also need to be mindful if you're using any, you might have your own contrib modules that other, you know, that not other people may not be using, that might need additional work. Like in some cases, we run into modules that aren't D10 compatible, and fortunately, you know, we've done searching, and sometimes you may find an available patch if you look at the issues on the actual contrib project. In other cases, like we may actually have to like issue a patch to said contrib module within an issue.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been made aware of something. If anyone here knows what it is, it's something like Drupal Lenient, which can, it's like maybe it's a Composer plugin. Anyway, it allows Composer to install something that, like, say a module that is only compatible with version 9, but there's a patch that makes it compatible with Drupal 10. So it allows you to install and patch it, even though by its, like, without this extension or module, it would just refuse to install it outright.
One more little tip: if you've got everything going, and you know, obviously a lot of this is module version updates, so don't forget to drush updb. But one of the nice things about drush updb is it will actually tell you which modules that are in place are incompatible with D10. So it gives you just a bright red message. And for us, this was, you know, we got all of the contrib modules in place, and then it went through and it identified all of our, you know, unique custom modules on any given project that needed to go have a version number changed. And typically, if you go look at a custom module, you'll see the version requirements set at 8 or 9. And really what you need to do is bump it to 9 or 10, and then deal with whatever deprecated functions need to be changed. Sometimes you don't have to deal with anything. Sometimes the PHP that you wrote in 8 and 9 is fine for 10. but there are a few significant changes. Luckily, the errors are pretty catastrophic, so it's pretty easy to tell when something is not working with D10 and PHP 8.
Nicole asked in the chat, will this be an annual heavy list with each new full version of Drupal? Or is there something significantly different between 9 and 10? 9 and 10 is actually a pretty small, comparatively, jump in terms of like how much you need to change the code. But it's not annual. The point releases are semi-annual, so I'm guessing it's like a 3 to 5 year cycle for these major version updates. But then just keep on top of the minor ones to make your own life easier and everything else.
There are some twig differences too between the new twig engine and the old twig engine. We were spared, everybody had to rebuild every theme ever from D7 to D8. It's not as bad this time, but there is a bit of twig stuff out there too.
Any other questions?
I'll just throw one more plug out there for keeping things updated. So the latest 2.0.x containers in ISLE include a Fedora update to 6.4.0, I believe. 6.2.x and 6.3.x had some race conditions that cause, like if you were ingesting a lot of stuff quickly, you could get some either corrupted or just sort of bounced objects from Fedora. And the 6.4.0 release, which is in that 2.0.5 plus container set from ISLE, solves that. So actually, we're seeing very much more reliable ingests in containers above 2.0. I think it's 4 was the last one before the update.
That's awesome. Absolutely.
There are no there are no manual things you have to do to Fedora to do that update. So you can just update the container, reboot on your system, and it comes back up.
And just a point, because I know this has come up before, updating your boxes or your build kit or whatever you're running on is super important, and it's a separate process from doing your Drupal. So there's no way to just like get a new Docker box to get your Drupal updated. That's something that you need to do manually.
Right. I'll underscore that just to say that all of especially in this case, like upgrading the PHP, the Drupal container to 2.x will get you PHP 8, and the FC repo update. There's a couple other like significant updates in there. All of them are independent. You don't need to just go all to 2.x, right? Take these things one at a time. I really recommend that folks do the PHP 8 upgrade and D10, get that all, squared away, and then work through the other updates if they're, feeling like they need to update everything, if you haven't kept up to date with those. We did PHP 8 first. We let that land, ran through the tests, and now we're working on the D10 stuff, and that'll let us sort of separate out issues that came up because of PHP 8 and D10. It just makes the whole process of debugging, if something goes wrong, much more straightforward if you are doing like one major version update at a time.
Well, thank you so much, Rosie and Noah and Luke, for the information and suggestions and tips on these updates.